The fossil record. Our roadmap looking through the fossil record will be this. First of all, the history of the world. We need to look at the history, how evolution describes it. We need to look at the history of the world as the Bible describes it. Then we'll go into the fossil record. We'll look at the fossil record in education. We'll look at something called the Cambrian explosion. Then we'll look at famous transitions used to support evolution. And then we'll finish it up with something called the mechanism for change, natural selection and mutations. So let's start with the history of the world. The evolution model postulates that about 4.6 billion years ago, this Earth evolved into existence all by natural processes. Then about 3.5 billion years ago, life evolved by natural processes. Then all species evolved over billions of years from a common ancestor. Then finally, the Earth was shaped by what we call uniformitarian processes over these billions of years. That is the history of the world based on the evolution idea. Now, the history of the world based on the Bible is very different. In Genesis 1:1, we read, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Then in Genesis 1:25, we read, "And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good." And then in Genesis 6:17, we read, "And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under the heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die." So we have two very different histories there. The evolution model says it's time, chance, and natural processes. Long periods of time. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created. He created the earth. He created the universe. The Bible teaches that God created all creatures after their kind. There was not one common ancestor everything evolved from. And then the Bible says this earth was not shaped by long periods of time, uniformitarian processes. It was mostly shaped by a worldwide flood. So we have two different models. Now each model, the evolution model and creation, can be determined by evaluating the lines of evidence. And there'll be two lines of evidence we'll look at. One is called the fossil record, and the second one is the mechanism for change. Because if there's no mechanism for change, then the fossils have to be interpreted as being created after their kind. So let's start. One of the best evidences we have, again, to determine the truthfulness of evolution is the fossil record. Now, what does each model predict about the fossil record? Well, the evolution model predicts that we should have many, many intermediates, transitional forms all the way up through the fossil record. Transitional forms, creatures that are slowly evolving into some other creature. We should find many, many transitions. But the Bible, the creation model, clearly predicts and states there should be no intermediates. We should find genetic variability. For instance, dogs. We have many flavors of dogs, but they're dogs. Many types of people, shapes and sizes, but we're all people. So the two models have a very different prediction. Well, let's take a look at what Charles Darwin had to say about all this. Charles Darwin wrote, "Why is not every geologic formation in every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this is the most obvious and serious objection which can be argued against the theory." So when Charles Darwin was coming out with his book, The Origin of Species, he made the statement, he doesn't have any physical evidence to support his claim. No fossil record to support his claim. He can't find his intermediates. Well, where are we at today? Let's see what we find in intermediates. What kind of intermediates should we find? Well, we should find intermediates between single-cell organisms all the way up to very complex creatures like jellyfish and trilobites. We should find intermediates between invertebrate and vertebrate. Invertebrate being those kind of creatures that we find mostly living in Washington, D.C. Now, invertebrate are those kind of creatures, really, that don't have a hard backbone. Vertebrae are those kind of creatures that do have a hard, bony type backbone. We should find creatures out there that have half a backbone, quarter backbone, all the way up down the line if evolution is true. We should find intermediates between fish and amphibians. We should find many, many creatures, fish-type creatures, that are growing legs, half legs, quarter legs, all the way up to amphibians. And finally, we should find intermediate between reptiles and birds. We should find many, many birds that have half scales and half feathers, and their internal anatomy is halfway between the two. If evolution is true, there should be observable evidence to support these claims. Well, let's see what our National Academy of Sciences has to say about this. Call this the fossil record in education. And this is what the National Academy of Sciences stated in their book, Science and Creationism. So many intermediate forms have been discovered between fish and amphibians, between amphibians and reptiles, between reptiles and mammals, and along the primate lines of descent, that it is often difficult to identify categorically when the transition occurs from one to another species. Wow! Right there, they're making this claim that there are many, many intermediates. Everywhere we look, we should find intermediates. That's what the National Academy of Sciences has claimed. Now, is this claim true? Well, before we answer that, let's go to one of our biology textbooks and see what they're stating there. And this is out of a 2001 biology textbook. And it says this: fossils offer the most direct evidence that evolution takes place. Fossils, therefore, provide an actual record of Earth's past life forms. Change over time, meaning evolution, can be seen in the fossil record. Now, is this true? They seem to be agreeing with the National Academy of Sciences. So where do we start to examine these claims? Well, we start by weighing the facts. What we will do is weigh the claims of the Bible against the claims of evolution. Are there intermediates out there, transitional forms, to support the evolution model? Well, let's start here. What I have pictured up here is a whole geologic history of this Earth based on the evolution model. This is our geologic time scale. And according to the evolution model, we should find creatures all up and down this geologic column here. We should find the simplest on the bottom, and we should see a gradual progression all the way up, going from very simple single-cell organisms all the way up to creatures we have living today. Gradual progression. Many, many intermediates, many transitional forms. Remember, the National Academy of Sciences said we should find so many we can't tell where one starts and the other one leaves off. Now, is that true?